Okay, another cutting room floor video here. Just sharing with you some of the things that didn't make the cut in the Sunday sermon, but could be helpful to think about or just interesting. And the theme of this video is just talking about this business of that radical possessiveness that we talked about in the sermon, this fundamental mistake that we make, that what I have ultimately belongs to me, right? And we forget this fundamental principle of biblical economics that all the world, all the earth and the fullness thereof is the Lord's. And whatever we have is gift. It's grace, wealth, it's grace, gifts, and it is all given to us by God, and not to be used just for our own consumption, but ultimately to be used for his kingdom purposes, however he intends that we would use it, right? So first of all, let me throw statistics at you. Consider this. The average size of the American home has nearly tripled in size over the past 50 years. But still, 1 out of every 10 Americans rent off-site storage, the fastest growing segment of the commercial real estate industry over the past 4 decades. Right? So homes have tripled in size in the past 50 years, yet still not enough space to house all the stuff that we accumulate. Or this, the United States, just keeping up with that. The United States has upward of 50,000 storage facilities, more than 5 times the number of Starbucks. Currently, there is 7.3 square feet of self-storage space for every man, woman, and child in the nation. So here it is. It is physically possible that every American could stand under the total canopy of self-storage roofing. I don't know. I think that's kind of interesting. And just kind of points to almost an American obsession to accumulating stuff and, I don't know, just reserving that stuff for our use, our consumption, our enjoyment here now and into whatever. So, okay, so take that. And then let me share some quotes for you. This is from a book that I think everybody ought to read, C.S. Lewis, Screwtape Letters, a series of fictional letters written from a senior devil to his trainee devils on how you go about tempting and enticing mankind. Just extremely insightful, great read, not that long. Everybody should grab it. In one of the letters, the senior devil Screwtape, he says to his trainee, "This sense of ownership in general is always to be encouraged. The humans are always putting up claims to ownership which sound equally funny in heaven and in hell, and we must keep them doing so." He goes on to say, "It is as if a royal child, whom his father has placed for love's sake in command of some great province, under the real rule of wise counselors, should come to fancy that he really owns the cities, the forests, and the corn in the same way he owns the bricks on the nursery floor." Let's see. We produce this sense of ownership not only by pride, but by confusion. We teach them not to notice the different senses of the possessive pronoun, the finely graded differences that run from my boots through my dog, my servant, my wife, my father, my master, and my country to my God. They can be taught to reduce all these senses to that of my boots, the my of ownership. And then he says this, "And all the time, the joke is that the word mine in its fully possessive sense cannot be uttered by a human being about anything. In the long run, either our father, the senior devil, or the enemy, who would be the creator God, will say mine of each thing that exists, and especially of each man. They will find out in the end, never fear, to whom their time, their souls, and their bodies really belong. Certainly not to them, whatever happens. At present, the enemy says, mine of everything on the pedantic legalistic ground that he made it. Our Father, again, Satan or the devil, hopes in the end to say mine of all things on the more realistic and dynamic ground of conquest." So watch out for this radical sense of possessiveness, would caution C.S. Lewis. The other quote, from a great book. Here it is. Richard Foster, Celebration, Freedom of Simplicity. Not my favorite book to read because it's extremely challenging, pokes at all sorts of hidden idols, but probably one of the more important books I think that every American Christian should read, just because it's so countercultural. You may not agree with everything. You may not have the wherewithal to put into practice half of the things that he mentions in here, but we should have the challenge that Richard Foster poses to us in the Freedom of Simplicity. And just a couple quotes from Richard Foster. He says, Jesus Christ and all the writers of the New Testament call us to break free of mammon lust, or love of money, like we talked about on Sunday, and live in joyous trust. They point us toward a way of living in which everything we have, we receive as a gift, and everything that we have is cared for by God. That's a really important point. Like, so often we tend to think that we are the ones to care for and to maintain and preserve the things that we have. And that's just a dangerous sense of autonomy. At the end of the day, God is the one who cares for the things that he entrusts to us, right? So again, New Testament writers point us to a way of living in which everything we have we receive as a gift, and everything we have is cared for by God, and everything we have is available to others when it is right and good. Man, that's another challenging point. This reality, says Foster, frames the heart of Christian simplicity. It is the means of liberation and power to do what is right and to overcome the forces of fear and avarice or greed. He talks about a lot in his book how, right, this idea of simplicity ultimately is freedom. And right, the more we accumulate stuff, or we hoard, or we possess, the more complex our life becomes, or the more enslaved our life becomes, because now these are all things that we become concerned about, that we have to maintain and keep up, and all of this. And so, that's perhaps the most challenging part of his book, is the way that he talks about simplicity as ultimately liberating and empowering too, right? It empowers us to live into the glory that God calls us to. One last quote from Foster. God's blessing is not for personal aggrandizement, but to benefit and bless all the peoples of the earth. To understand this distinction makes all the difference in the world. The theology of wealth says, I give so I can get. Christian simplicity says, I get so that I can give. And this difference is profound. Again, when we talk about simplicity, or when we talk about greed and avarice, the whole point is not that wealth and possessions and things are inherently evil in and of themselves. It's that the love of these things, or that sense of entitlement, or that sense of possessiveness is the problem. It's the love of money. It's the love of mammon. And then just that quote really gets to it, right? The whole worldly theology of wealth says, I give of my energy, my time, or my resources so that I can get, right? But biblical theology says, I get so that I can give. All that has been given to me, whether it's my time, my home, my possessions, my dinner table, whatever it is, I have been given this, or I get these things from the gracious hand of God, ultimately so that I may give it back in service to him and to his kingdom. So there you go. Some striking statistics about our addiction to accumulating and possessing, the warnings of that from C.S. Lewis, and then, this really challenging vision of freedom and simplicity, and this notion that all that I have that has been given to me, I am to steward in service to the kingdom. I get so that I can give. There you go. Hope it's helpful.